Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Hey, Genevieve.
Hey, Dave. How you doing?
Good. I'm trying to scare the dog out of here so so if she barks, it won't be too loud.
Yeah.
What's new in your world this week?
Not a whole lot. I've been getting out a little bit more now that I'm fully vaccinated, and so is most everybody else in my community. So that's been fun, making new friends. Hanging out with old ones too. Now that I'm back in my hometown, that's what I've been up to. It's been nice.
Yeah, it is good to get out again, feel somewhat normal, even though we're far from normal yet. But
Yeah.
it's good to get out there and do some things. So I think we should not hesitate to bring our guest on this week and don't wait any longer. Welcome, everyone, Dr. Darrel Ray.
Hey, Dave, Genevieve, good to be here.
Hey, Daryl, how you doing?
Good.
So you met Genevieve in the pre-show a little bit.
Yep, right.
I was telling Daryl a little bit, but Genevieve, give Daryl, Daryl and I come from a religious background, thus his organization we'll talk more about, Recovering from Religion, but give Daryl and remind the audience how you didn't come from that, where you came from and how you got involved in these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, it's so nice to meet you. I'm a huge fan of your organization, and I am very fortunate that I myself have never needed it as a resource because, as Dave said, I did not grow up with any religion. I grew up in a very secular household with family that also had a certain disdain for religion and what it was doing to people. And then I moved to the Bible Belt, about an hour and a half away from where Dave is now. And that was a trip. Yeah. I didn't realize that, I understood that most people believed in God and that like a lot of people in America were Christian, but I didn't realize what came along with that as in, you genuinely think that there's a man in the sky who is talking to you and caring about you and that there's angels and demons and that, you can't do all of these things or you're going to burn in hell for eternity. And it was, every day I'm still kind of surprised when I think about all of the other things that go along with this belief that's so normalized.
Oh yeah, it's crazy, but you are so lucky you escaped.
Yes. Yeah.
Dave and I aren't so lucky, but Dave's less lucky than I was. I was raised in a pretty.
Yeah, you were kind of in a benign form of religion. I was in the fundamentalist evangelical world, which is the bane of this country and everything. But before we get into that, I want to remind viewers that we have call lines open, and we want to talk about this evening religious trauma, recovering from religion, these kind of things. Obviously, that's Daryl's focus and the focus of the organization Recovering from Religion, which he founded, and we'll learn more about that in just a few minutes. But open lines, plenty of open lines. Call in, ask a question, make a comment, nothing's off the table. So anything you want to talk about, we'll talk about. So Daryl, we were just together last weekend doing what?
We were at our excursion, the Recovering from Religion excursion, which is actually a retreat. We just don't call it that because it has religious overtones.
Yes, it does.
We do not like religious overtones or undertones or
trigger warnings. Well, tell us about what's the reason for that and what went on there and what's that all about?
Well, it's an opportunity for people to just come together that are on their journey out of any religion. I mean, and we have just about every North American religion you could identify at the retreat. We did it the first time 2 years ago, and then COVID hit. It was so successful. We had we had 50 people there, plus some volunteers. And then this year we had 70 people there, including volunteers. So it grew. We added about 20 seats to the excursion this year. But we had people telling their stories. Just talking to other people who are going through their journey away from religion can be quite healing and helpful. At the same time, we had speakers. I was one of the speakers. I spoke on religious infection. I also spoke on sexuality. I did 2 different talks. But Dr. Travis Voorhees, who's one of the co-hosts of the Secular Therapy Project, he did a talk. Candace Gorham, whom you know really well, Candace was there to give a talk, a couple different things. She talked on her new book that's coming up on death, grief, death, and dying. And she also did a meditation class to teach people some meditation techniques. So it was a wide range of things that people could do, wide range of activities.
And Alice Gretchen.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, I didn't mean to forget her. Alice was.
Oh my goodness.
We brought her in. She was our special guest. We try to have a special guest every year. And this year we had Alice, who's a bona fide actress. Look at her IMDb look up IMDb, Alice Gretchen. You have to spell her last name right though, because I can't spell it. It's very different. And you'll realize this woman has been in an amazing number of films and things, and she's a legitimate actress building a career for herself. But more interesting to us was her talk on the neurobiology of mystical experiences.
Fascinating.
It was, wasn't it? It was.
Oh my God. Yes. She's brilliant. And she's written a book called, we're going to have her on, Genevieve. She's coming on in November. We don't have the date set yet, but she'll be a guest on the show.
She is so
excited for that.
Her talk was a talk a PhD would be proud.
Absolutely. Incredible slide presentation.
Yeah.
Basically what's going on in the brain when you're slain in the spirit, when you're speaking in tongues, those things that we attributed to the power of the Holy Spirit, there's a legitimate brain thing going on in your brain that explains what those experiences are all about. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And she had done her research. It was up-to-date research, some of which I wasn't familiar with. So I learned from it.
But, I had so many good connections with so many people at that excursion. Just, the speakers, as you and I both know, Daryl, at things like that, the speakers are great, but it's those one-on-one connections that you make, isn't it?
Right. And it was such a gorgeous surroundings with 3 ponds right next to all the cabins, and beautiful cabins. We did have some logistical problems with water in a couple of the cabins, but it didn't.
Who needs running water when you're out roughing it like that, right?
Yeah, we weren't too happy about that, but things happen. You can't help it sometimes.
No, it was a great experience, and applause to you guys. Shannon Nebo was kind of the heart and soul getting that going. I mean, the nuts and bolts of running it.
Right.
And Barb in the kitchen. Oh boy, that was fun. Yeah. But just all the work behind the scenes that is required for those kind of things just always impresses me.
We had a number of people who were back for the second time. They were at the first one, they're back for this one. And we had a lot that were brand new to it. But like you said, Dave, it's talking to other human beings, going walking around the pond and getting acquainted with somebody else and hearing their story. We also had 5 secular therapists there from the Secular Therapy Project, counting me, 4, not counting me. And they were available to talk to anybody. And we counted up that at least 18 and probably close somewhere between 18 and 25 people actually took advantage of the opportunity to just sit down and talk with a certified, legitimate therapist about their journey. Now, they weren't there to do therapy. They were there to be a good ear and to maybe refer some resources. But that's a unique thing about we have therapists right there. We have good speakers. We have cool people like you, Dave, there to talk to. And, people like connecting with you because you've been through a lot of the shit that they've been through.
Oh, I had so many people that just wanted to talk to me, having heard my story. I had so many great conversations with individuals. It was just rich.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot of fun. I mean, a weekend, we look forward to it for a year. I mean, we have already started. I'm serious. We've already started planning. We've reserved the venue for next year already. We are ready.
Well, isn't the goal actually to have to expand it and have one in the fall in the east and one in the west in the spring and something like that once we get kind of normalized in this country again?
Yeah, we would like to see that because I think there's plenty of opportunity on both coasts and Midwest. We're even talking, and this is still in the talking phase, but we're serious about it. We're even talking about going and doing something like this in Australia because we have a lot of RFR people in Australia. I bet we've got 15 related people who are actually doing stuff in some way, shape, or form, whether it be therapists or agents in Australia that are really, really excited.
We tend to think of, and we've got a couple of calls, and one of them is going to touch on this, so we'll get to it in just a second. But we tend to think of religious dogma and fundamentalism as a Bible Belt thing, the South and the Midwest, and it is hyper prevalent there. But this everywhere. We got people in the UK, you got Australia, out, everywhere you can think of. Fundamentalism is an issue.
Yeah, and I've been surprised at how many chats we have gotten over the years from Norway. You think of Norway as really, really secular, and even Sweden, but Norway's the one that surprised me the most. There are some nasty cults in Norway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but even though Norway's predominantly secular, there's still religious cults there.
Well, Daryl, I want to get to recovering from religion a little more in depth in just a minute, but Genevieve, I wanted to ask you, Genevieve, are you surprised? I know you got into this space, if you will, because you saw what was going on around you, even though you didn't come out of it. Were you surprised, and are you still surprised that religious trauma is a real thing?
I am not surprised whatsoever. It kind of, I think it wasn't something that I necessarily thought of too much when I was growing up, but I think at the same time, we didn't really have that language when I was growing up, but I already knew of people who had grown up religious and were still dealing with, fears of hell and, their own existential crises. And so it only made sense that religious trauma would exist. And then, of course, once I started getting really diving into evangelical Christianity, particularly in America, I spent a lot of time in ex-Christian groups and listening to ex-Christian podcasts. And that is such a universal experience of, even if you're not dealing with the trauma of the beliefs that you grew up and the fear that you had instilled in yourself, there's still just the trauma of grief, because you're not just losing, you're not losing a belief, you're losing an entire identity, you're losing an entire community. And I think that's something that I think is so beautiful about what you're doing, Daryl, and especially with this retreat, is that it's so important for people to know that the benefits that they got from religion, that community and that connection, that's a lot of what makes people stay. And you can get there. You can get that elsewhere. So I think that's really great.
We put a lot of emphasis on that at the excursion. This is your new community if you want it, or build one like this back at where you came from.
Yeah, and we'll talk. I've got a call I want us to take, but we'll talk more about. I want you to bring us back to this if I forget. The chat rooms and the actual in-person groups that you're forming all over the world. What are they called actually? The
meetup groups.
Meetup groups, yeah. Basically, support groups essentially is what they are. Yeah, for people in a particular location to have someone to go and sit with and talk to.
Peer support groups is what they are.
So I want to take a call from Robert in New Jersey. Him. And he asks, why does fundamentalist religion tend to be in the South? What we were just talking about. So let me see if I can get him on. Hello, Robert. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Robert.
I was curious. I was curious about this because I'm in New Jersey, and I went to church for years because I liked singing in the choir, and it's one of the few chances to sing with piano or organ instead of just with a radio. But the way the religion was presented in the various churches I went to was very calm. It was more like they tell a story out of the Bible and tell you how it might apply to today's living. There was no hellfire and brimstone, none of that. It seems like that version of preaching is just a purely Southern thing, where it's very forceful and it's immediate, and you have to get right with God right now. I mean, is that true? Is that why there's so much fundamentalism in the South compared to the North?
Well, Daryl, what do you think? Why do you think it's more prevalent in some areas like the South and the Midwest?
Well, there's some good reasons for that. Historically, it's a historical thing.
Okay.
If you think about where did Southern Baptists come from? They came from slavery. I mean, they even had slavery as part of their constitution as late as 1979. You know, they did not condemn slavery as late as 1979. So we can look at the very roots of religion in the United States, and two things can be seen. The first one is that religion is generally a product of a lack of education. So if you look throughout the world, the more educated a population is, the less religious they are. The second thing you can see, and this is a trend, of course, there's exceptions to trends, but it's a pretty darn big trend. And that is, as industrialization grew, so religion went down. The more industrialized you are, the more migration there's going to be. The more people are going to move from job to job. The more educated people are going to be. The more are going to be involved in the real world, not the fantasy world. If you're an agricultural economy, as the South was, and your main function is picking cotton, or growing tobacco, and it's really easy to stay inside the supernatural bubble. Oh, and that supernatural bubble also maintains the social hierarchy with black people on the bottom and white people on the top, and that sort of stuff. So there was lots and lots of reasons for the South to stay in its deeply religious fundamentalist focus for at least a century and a half.
Why would that be true now? Because that would mean that places like Dallas and Houston and Atlanta would be less religious, and they seem to be more.
Well, there's no doubt that some of them are, but you don't know what the general population. I mean, look at it. The population has grown a lot in Dallas. It's been a very fast-growing city for a long time. So, how many more churches are there now than there were in 1970? I'm going to guess, although I have no data to go by, but probably about the same number of churches. It's the thing about churches right now is the small churches are dying, and the mega churches may be growing, but they're not growing as fast as the small church populations are dying. So you've kind of got this up and down going on. Now, who gets the most media coverage? It's the Joel Osteens. It's the mega churches.
Right.
It's the Pat Robertsons. But that little guy who's running a Southern Baptist church with 100 members down the road from me right now, he ain't getting no news media coverage. So,
and he's not getting any new members either. His members are dying off, and the new ones aren't coming in. And very few of those members are leaving his church to go for the mega churches, because the mega church is 30 miles away.
I'm just curious how they get away with that style of preaching. I mean, how do they get away with that? I mean, that you're a sinner, you're not worthy, you're going to hell if you don't. That would not fly up here. That really, I've never heard a preacher talk like that.
Well, wait a minute. Where do you live? Robert, where do you live?
He's in New Jersey.
Okay, then you need to go back and look at your history in New Jersey. Read Cotton Mather's sermon on sinners in the hands of an angry God. That's the name of it.
That's Jonathan Edwards.
I'm sorry, Jonathan Edwards.
Yeah. God holding you over a fire. Right.
That was just in Massachusetts, not far from where you live. And remember, if you look at the constitutions of those states, of the 13 original colonies, 12 of those original colonies had religious tests. For example, in Georgia, you could, if you were of any religion, you could be an official of the state, unless you were Catholic or Jewish. Catholics and Jews were forbidden by the Georgia Constitution from holding office. But if you look up in Massachusetts, it was mainly a Catholic colony. They put restrictions on Protestants. But which of these two states industrialized? which of these two states has the best educated population? And that's why in New Jersey now they've got much less religion than they do down in Georgia.
What was your experience in small town? Go ahead, Robert. I'm sorry.
No, I guess it's just what I was exposed to. I grew up in small towns in New Jersey where the minister would just be somebody who, went off to Bible school and came back, and I don't think they would think to call you a sinner to your face. It just seems to be. It just seemed like that was not the sort of thing they would do. I mean, before I left the church because we were moving, I asked the minister because I never believed, and I said to him, I said, so if I go to die and go to heaven, will I be just like this in heaven, like I'm standing here talking to you? And he said, no, your soul goes to heaven. And I said, is my soul anything I could sense or interact with or affect in any way? He said, no. And I said, then who cares what happens to it? And he just
That's
looked
a
at
good
me
question.
and him. And I said, okay, well, nice knowing you. We are moving to another town. But he didn't say, oh, God is by nothing. He had nothing. So I never ran across a fundamentalist sort of person up here. So that's why I call it that.
Well,
but,
they're there. They're there. In any place in the country you go to, you can find the Southern Baptists and the Pentecostals. They're just not as prevalent and you mentioned some of those big cities in the South. When we're talking about the South as a whole, Georgia is different than Atlanta. Yeah. And Texas is different than Dallas and Houston.
Especially
and North Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina is different than Charlotte. So when you get in the big cities in the South, you'll find a different mindset. I call them blue dots in red states. Right. It's when you get out. I mean, Genevieve, share your experience with small town North Carolina in terms of fundamentalism.
Yeah, I mean, well, my small town was interesting just because we were close to a military base. And so we actually did have a decent amount of people from all over. But something that it really matched up with where you get those fire and brimstone preachers, it seemed completely political. It very much aligned with, Christian conservatism and, Republicans in particular. And I think a lot of that has to do with how this preaching of fire and brimstone and you're a sinner, it's all about judgment and also about fear. And when you live in a small town, when you take the Bible to mean that like homosexuality is a sin, then you're going to be angry about the world. You're going to say that, you're going to, what was it? Pat Robertson, I think, who said that Hurricane Katrina was because of the gays, Yeah. So they, what they're doing is, yeah, exactly. What it really comes down to is they're projecting their own fear of the other, their own anger at the world. And that's what they see their God as well. God has a million definitions, but it seems like he always kind of lines up with whoever the person is that's describing it.
Yeah. You were lucky, Robert, in that you grew up out of the crosshairs of evangelicalism, because it's a prevalent, and it is more prevalent in some parts of the country than others, as we talked about. But it is, you can find it everywhere, and you just happened to
I know I'm lucky. I just finished Dr. Ray's book, The God Virus. I got it for Father's Day. I just finished it, and really extremely well written. When I was reading it, I thought, okay, how's he going to keep this God virus metaphor going? Maybe for a chapter, maybe it's the entire book. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's really awesomely written. Well done, sir. It's really great.
Well, thank you. You beat me to it, Robert. I was just getting ready to say before you made that comment, and I appreciate that. Really do. In that book, I kind of predict that it's going to get worse before it gets better, because it's almost like once something is attacked, if an animal is attacked, it has a defense mechanism. Well, religion in the United States is feeling under attack. So it's going to fight back. And I say in several places in the book, it's going to get worse. Basically, I almost want to tell people, look, I told you so. But I shouldn't be.
When did you write that? When did you write that, Daryl? 5 years ago about?
The book? Oh, hell no. The book itself was written in 2008. It was published in 2009. And I dare say, Robert, except for the specific examples in it, like I mentioned people that are dead now, of course, but except for the specific examples, I wouldn't change a word in the whole book. It's all still true.
Yeah, it reads like you wrote it yesterday.
Yeah.
It really is well done.
Well, thank you. When I write a book, my philosophy is to write a book that's going to be factually the same in 5 years. And if I can get 10 years, fine. I think this one's 13 years now. So it's doing great.
Yeah. It's like you wrote it after COVID became a virus.
Yeah. It's great. Well, I've taken up enough of your time.
Thank you for your call, Robert. And
thanks, Robert.
So well.
All right, man. Talk to you later.
All right. Great show, David and Genevieve. Great show. Good job starting this thing up. Thanks for being a public figure. You're making the world a better place.
Good.
Thank you, brother.
You're too sweet.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
I want to talk more about all those things, but let me go ahead and get this call. Jack's been hanging on a minute. If you guys okay with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Jack wants to ask me, hey, Jack.
Hey, Dave. How's it going, man?
Good. You're on with Genevieve and Dave and Dr. Darrel Ray. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great, dude. I just listened to the last caller, and I was the opposite. So I kind of grew up in a extremely fundamentalist household. Went to Christian school, the whole fucking smear.
Mm-hmm.
And
how are you doing? You feel like you've gotten?
Indoctrinated.
You feel like you've gotten free from all that pretty well?
Dave, I never really believed in it.
Good. Glad it didn't get its claws in you.
Like bullshit to me, and I always held the theory that religion is merely a mask that covers people's fear of death, and I think that it's all it really is. And I think that when you're afraid of the inevitable, you start making up things that are going to happen beyond the life. When you have a beautiful life here, I mean, like, what's wrong with what we have on Earth? It's always
so. Jack, Daryl, what is it? I'm sorry. What is it then? If Daryl, so the virus didn't get its hooks into Jack. So what does that mean? He had. How do you explain how some people are more susceptible to the virus than others?
Well, that's a good question. And Jack, I'd like to know a little more about Jack. But if I were to take a psychological approach to somebody like Jack and realize that he was raised in an area that was deeply infected with this God virus, and yet it didn't take with him. One thing we know from quite a bit of research over the years is there's 5. It's called the Big 5 in personalities in humans. There's 5 different personality characteristics in humans. And only one of those characteristics is strongly correlated or inversely correlated with religion. So if I gave you a personality test and I found that you score very high on openness to new experience and curiosity, which is one of the 5. If I find out you score high on that, then I can predict that you are likely to be very less religious or not religious at all. It's inversely correlated. If you understand what I'm saying there. So the more open you are to new experience and curiosity, the less religious you are. My guess is you're an open person with respect to exploring and learning new ideas. Would I be correct in that assumption?
So you're absolutely correct, Dr. Ray.
Okay. So you were the kid. I'm just going to go out on a limb here. You were the kid at 7 years old that drove your parents crazy asking, why, Dad? Why, Mom?
Well, after I found out there was no Santa Claus, it all kind of went downhill from there.
That makes sense.
What are the things you can tell?
Jesus hasn't brought me nothing. Fuck Jesus.
If you are high on that characteristic, you're probably not going to be religious. You're the kid that's going to be asking way too many questions in Sunday school. You might be the one that gets kicked out of Sunday school because you did ask the wrong questions. And
so Daryl, as a psychologist, then
my senior year.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
What'd you say,
Yeah, I was in a
Jack?
Christian school. I got kicked out my senior year right before graduation.
I rest my case.
I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Daryl nailed it.
I took the high road. I did not take the high road. I took the low road and lied my ass off to get back in so I could graduate with my class.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Daryl, as I've got a question about that though. So is this nature or nurture? Are the people that don't have those predispositions to catch the virus, what do you find as a psychologist? What is that? I
hate nature nurture. I think they're pretty. I
triggered you because I knew that. You took the bait.
Oh, Dave, damn it. You've got my number. Hey,
I got your number. I know you too well.
Push my buttons. It's not nature nurture. There's a lot of nuance here. And one thing I wanted to emphasize is that genetics, your susceptibility to the COVID virus, for example, has something to do with your genetics and how your immune system is structured. So maybe my immune system is really strong in a whole lot of areas that I could be resistant to a lot of things, but it's weak around COVID. Then if COVID comes in my region or area and I get in my system, I could die from it, even though I've got a really healthy immune system otherwise. That's the way religions work. Religions look for your weak spot. And religions are always probing. That's what they're doing when they're knocking on your door, when they're teaching you a Bible lesson, when you're putting God hates abortionists up on billboards and stuff like that. They're probing to find out where your weak spot is. And then the religion gets into that weak spot and infects you with a whole lot of other doctrines. Let me throw a little experiment out. If I said black lab dog, black Labrador, could you describe the personality of that dog?
You there, Jack?
Jack? Well, I'll keep going. How about Dachshund? Could you, or how about Poodle?
The personality. What's your answer, Genevieve? Do you think you can tell a personality from a dog breed?
Loosely. There's predispositions, of course, but not every dog's going to be the same.
Okay. Would you expect a pit bull to have the same personality as a black lab?
Not really.
Well, wait a minute then. What if a black lab raised a puppy as a pit bull puppy? Would the pit bull puppy then behave like a black lab?
I mean, gosh, it's a tough question because it depends on the dog. I know I have 4 of them, and they all have different personalities. But
so where did the dog get their personality? Did the dog get the personality from its mother because it did not know its father? Almost no dog knows who its father is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so where did they get the personality?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing with dogs, and we've seen this too with like domesticating foxes, is that we are breeding and selecting for certain personality traits.
You're exactly right. So I'll rest my case right there, Genevieve. It's genetic.
Yeah.
What we now know after some decades of research is that 50% of your personality is directly related to your genes. What if those genes have a propensity towards following authoritarian leadership or a propensity towards supernaturalism? Then you are going to be more easily infected with religious ideas. And it's pretty clear. Now, the fact is, if you're in the United States, and you've got that personality configuration, you're more likely to get infected with evangelism. But if you were in Pakistan, you would same person, same genetics, you are more likely to get infected with Islam. It's whatever God virus is in the environment. You can't catch COVID in Antarctica right now because it ain't there,
That's
only
good.
What's in
That's
your
very,
environment.
That's I think that's an incredibly helpful way to look at things and what's going on in the country and why certain areas are more susceptible to the God virus.
Right.
And you know, Christians will tell you themselves, evangelicals have these statistics. If you don't get kids when they're young, you're less likely to get them. If you don't get kids in there when they're going into high school and youth group, and these college groups, when kids are coming in and they're all vulnerable and insecure and scared. So you go to these college campus groups and try to get your hooks in them. Then there's certain periods of time in life when the virus, you're more susceptible to the virus.
The Jesuits used to say, "Give me the boy till 7, I'll give you the man."
Yep.
And as I write about in the God virus, when you're under a lot of social stress or physical stress, or your immune system is under stress, you are highly susceptible to getting infected with religious viruses. So when somebody dies in your family, why do ministers spend the whole funeral proselytizing? Because that's the time to grab you.
Yeah. And they know it.
Yep. Exactly.
You get a diagnosis of cancer today, I'll guarantee you the chaplain will be in the hospital room with you trying to save your soul tomorrow.
And that speaks to what Jack had on his note. Said, wants to ask Dave why he didn't turn to religion after my ALS diagnosis. Because it's bullshit, and I knew it.
Yeah, that's where I was getting to, Dave.
Well, I mean,
fake it till you make it, Pascal's wager type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you know my story at all, you know that when I discarded religion, it was such a done deal. It was just like I was just completely done, and so getting an ALS diagnosis didn't move the needle on that at all. Not even a fraction. There was no thought, not for a second. Oh, maybe I messed up. Maybe God's punishing me. Maybe God's testing me. None of that shit ever entered my mind. So the idea, I've said it before, that this phrase, "There's no atheist in foxholes," is lie.
Yeah,
because I'm an atheist and I'm in a foxhole.
Yeah. You really can't control what you do or don't believe.
No.
When my father passed away last year, it's heartbreaking. I still grieve so hard every day, but wanting this possibility of seeing him in an afterlife doesn't mean that I can actually believe there's an afterlife, because my beliefs have nothing to do with my wants. It has everything to do with my logic and my rationality. Yeah,
that's so good. I mean, you can't make yourself believe something your mind knows is not true. Well, Jack, thank you for the call. Anything else? We'll let you go before we let you go.
Hey, no, it was a great call and very informative. I'm gonna have to check out Dr. Ray's book. I'm a pretty avid reader, so I'm gonna
The God Virus. Pick it up at Amazon. Yeah. All right, man. Thanks for calling.
I always really enjoy listening to you guys.
Appreciate your support.
I see Will Judy's on here. He's a friend of mine, and he's saying you are a master masturbator, or something.
Masturbator.
Yeah, right.
I chatted with Will the other day. Hey, Will. Before I've got another call I want to get to real quick. I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't, like and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate your support. If you can become a Patreon supporter, we would appreciate that. Everything that you can share helps us do what we're doing. So, but definitely subscribe to the channel and share it and like it, because we have these amazing conversations every week. It's just we're really enjoying this. Can we take another call, guys?
Sure.
Okay, we got Seth in Michigan. Him wants to ask Dr. Ray and hosts, that's me and Yuji, about theist arguments and how they defend them in conversation. Hello, Seth.
Hello.
How are you, man?
Hey, Seth.
I'm doing good. I'm the one that you met in the Tennessee retreat, Dave.
Oh, Seth. Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Man? I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good, man. Great. Seth, give us just a brief synopsis of what you came out of. Dr. Ray would find it fascinating, I think, and what you're dealing with, and then we can get to your question.
Sure. So have any of you, well, obviously Dave has because I told him, but have you heard of the PRC, Protestant Reformed Churches?
Nope, that's a new one for me.
Yeah, I can't say that I have
Okay.
either.
So, yeah, it's a very conservative Dutch Reformed background church. They're down to like 8,000 members at this point. It's not many people, but basically, very conservative Calvinist background. And I was going to become a pastor, and I went to school to become a pastor. I didn't actually go to seminary yet, but I started listening to a bunch of different podcasts and just started slowly expanding my bubble. And over the course of a year and a half or so, I deconverted. And I kept it quiet for a while, but there was one night after church where I was elected president of the young adults group in our church. And that was just too much for me. So I came out to my parents. And that was a disaster. Went to the pastor that night and started the process of church discipline, where you talk to elders and pastor for a few months. And about a year ago, maybe, not so much, maybe 9 months ago, I was officially excommunicated from the PRC. So,
Congratulations.
And I still, yeah, thank you. And I'm still in regular contact, even though shunning is sort of a practice of the church. I'm still working for my dad right now. So, I'm still in constant contact with the PRC. So that's a struggle that I have.
Is that triggering you occasionally?
Yeah, it is. I really feel like I should get a new job. It's just that.
Well, you told us that you work for your dad, and he doesn't talk to you basically other than work related conversations, but pretty much a non-relationship at this point.
Yeah, and that goes both ways. It's it's really hard to have any kind of relationship when the church tells you that the only relationship you're allowed to have is converting.
Yeah.
So,
I remember recommending Recovering from Religion. Have you had a chance to connect with anyone in the organization that Daryl founded?
I have not. There's a Recovering from Religion group in Holland, Michigan, which is not so far away. I've been going to Center for Inquiry meetings.
Oh, good.
So I've connected with some people, but no, I haven't really used Recovering from Religion much.
Well,
and you were able to connect with a friend that I have up there as well. You guys got together, if I recall.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, that's right. Pellerino.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, we talked for a while, and then we played frisbee golf recently too.
Oh, really? Cool.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, did you have any? What your question was about how to defend them in the? Go ahead and ask your question for Dr. Ray.
Sure. So I've been in a lot of contact lately with people who are really into Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Pageau and those types. And I just find it interesting talking to them, especially through the lens of like your book, The God Virus, just thinking about the meme adapting so it can survive, how they have all these psychological analyses and looking at patterns in art and how you always see things through a narrative, so there's no real objective lens to view things through, so you might as well accept the place that you're born into. and I just find it interesting because when I'm listening to this, all I'm thinking is a man floating through the clouds to a place called heaven, or zombies wandering Jerusalem, or, any of these things, just all of the miraculous claims of the Bible, or spirits, or whatever. And I just, I guess I'd like just some thoughts on that phenomenon, if you have any. Christianity, especially more conservative Christians, thinking that these are defenses of their faith.
Yeah.
Well, are you in active conversation with these people?
Yes, I am.
What motivates you to be in active conversation with them?
Well, I just went on Meetup, and I just was looking for places to have conversations with people, because I'm kind of I like to have some kind of debate from time to time. And Center for Inquiry was one place I went. That was also for community. And then also there's a Jordan Peterson discussion group near me. And I thought that would just be interesting to see that perspective and talk to them.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure you've answered the question though. What motivates you to do this?
What do you want to get out of it? What's your purpose in doing it?
Right.
Essentially. Could be just recreational, It's just sport.
I feel like recreational is what I'm going for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounded like when you were talking about you like to debate. And what do you think about that, Daryl? I mean, I guess.
Well, I wonder if I'm not finished with that yet. It may be recreational, but what I really want to understand is, does it disturb you when you have these conversations? Do you lose sleep over it at night? Do you think about it for hours on end afterwards?
No, the only conversations that really bother me is when we get to talking about hell. It really bothers me when people don't seem to care about the doctrine of hell and just view it as a brush off kind of fact. That bothers me. But normal debates, conversations, I actually enjoy them.
Okay. Well, knock yourself out. Have a good time. And I wouldn't have any trouble with that. If it does trigger you, or that you have emotional responses to people's understanding or lack thereof of hell, I would pay attention to that, because why put yourself through that?
Yeah, what I guess your point is you're making, Daryl, is you don't want to get yourself in a situation that causes you undue trauma, and don't subject yourself to something that's going to cause you to get disturbed. I'm
also curious if you have somewhat of a need that you want to convert them or put great logic into their heads. Is that a motivation on your part?
It might be. I don't know. Maybe it is. Like, I don't like to think it is, but it probably is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think a lot of us want to do that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to. My concern is, and I see this a lot, you do what works for you, Seth. Darrel's not an expert on your life. You're the expert. What I see, though, when people put a lot of time and energy into wanting to convert other people, it actually detracts from them dealing with some of their own stuff and learning to where to go from there. And I'm not a debater, so it's not even something I enjoy. But I would just ask yourself, am I doing this to try and convert them? Or am I doing this because I still got questions I haven't answered? Am I doing this because I'm angry about the way people treat hell or something? I don't know. But I would like to scratch the surface and get down there and find out what your motivation is. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it could be that. A large part of my motivations is that I'm frustrated with how I've been treated with no seeming justification, and I do want to be combative, because it's like I want to push past these barriers that have changed my life so much.
Right.
So yeah, there's probably definitely personal issues there that are driving it.
Well, I think a lot of people who get engaged in that stuff are really trying to make a difference. You're really trying to help people live better and more productive lives. And you can see that their belief structure is inhibiting or interfering with that. And I think people like Jordan Peterson are the masters at using crazy logic to keep people trapped in their own bubbles. That's what I see Jordan Peterson doing. So my question or my challenge to you would be, Seth, could you take that energy that you're spending debating these people and put it towards making a real difference in somebody's life? And I'm going to go there. You could volunteer for Recovery from Religion.
I knew you would.
But I don't care. CFI needs volunteers. You can debate all day long on the Jordan Peterson thing. You won't change a single person's mind. Or you could go to CFI and help them make a difference in the world. Or you could volunteer for Recovery from Religion and talk to a real human being who's struggling to get out of their religious brainwashing. So the question is, how do you want to spend your time in this one life that you have? You only got one life, and you can only use it one time to make a difference in this particular world. So that's my challenge to you. What are you going to use? You can use that time non-productively with Jordan Peterson, or you can use it productively somewhere else to actually make a difference in somebody's life.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that.
And Dr. Ray's not going to charge you for this session, so this is on the house, right, Daryl?
Yeah.
But he was asking, and there's probably not an answer for that right now, but I love his approach to this, because as you know, my message, it's about making the moments in this one life count. And I love what Daryl said, that we have to measure how we're spending our time and whether that time is productive towards something. And there are plenty of places you can put your debating skills and desires to good use in ways that really move people forward in life. Because many people are stuck in a place and they don't know how to get out of it and how to move forward. And there are avenues for you to engage with that and make a difference. And so that's some really, really good food for thought, I think, tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet, man. You're a good guy. I know you're still kind of new in all of this. And a lot of, I wanted to speak to it as well. I think we all go through what's known as the angry atheist phase, where we're pissed off. We're pissed off that we were lied to. We're pissed off that religion is getting away with this shit. We're pissed off that they're not paying taxes, all this shit. We're just pissed off. And we can expend a lot of negative energy into that void and get nothing back from it. And so a lot of us go through that phase and then come out on the other side of it. And the people who stay in that place, to me, are wasting their energy and wasting their lives, because you really can't. I mean, yeah, we get angry. I get angry at the anti-vaxxers every day because they are killing people and they are inhibiting my life. And that's selfish, but it's true. But I can't stay in that angry place. I just can't. It's too costly. So I've had to find ways to take the energy, the one bit of energy, the one life I have, and find a way to make a difference in a positive vein for people. And so that's what I think Daryl's challenge to you is just look in and look out and look around and see, how's that working for you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Good.
Thank you.
You bet, man.
Enjoy your life.
Well, thanks for calling in, Seth, and keep in touch. And I'm just looking for good things for you and moving forward. You're a good guy. Enjoyed meeting you a few weeks ago.
I love that.
I enjoyed meeting you too. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Take care.
I love that you Cass is having that retreat in Tennessee.
Yeah, we had that. And Seth drove down from Michigan.
Yeah.
Like after work on Friday, all through the night, got there Saturday morning, hung out all day Saturday, got a couple hours sleep, and then drove back Saturday night. I mean, Sunday to work. He was that, desperate for connection, coming out of that hyper conservative fundamentalism that he came out of. But he's a very, very sharp young man. I remember being really impressed with him. So he's trying to find a place to engage. And so, I think he'll figure it out.
I think there's going to be a need for a lot of these kinds of retreats, whether it's the retreat that we do or the kind of retreat you guys did with Cass. Mm-hmm. It's going to be more and more as people leave. They need support, and they need intense support sometimes that you can only get through that kind of peer group sometimes. So,
well, Daryl, tell us.
Hats off to Cass for doing that. I love.
That was our third one we've done. So it's been a few different people each time, but some of the same ones as well.
Right.
Marie was there. Marie.
No, who is Marie?
Yeah, Marie. So Daryl, take us back. What's it been? 12 years now? 11 years?
12 years. 12 years. You mean
What was it that caused you? What was the formulation of recovering from religion in your mind? Where did this come from and why? Just the nuts and bolts of it.
It was an accident. It was as many things are in life. Mm-hmm. I was trying to promote my book, The God Virus, and it was like March of 2009. The book had just come out in January, and I was promoting the hell out of it, of course. And my publicist said, well, Daryl, you ought to start a group. You ought to start an organization called Recover from Religion and use that to market your book. I thought, well, that's a good idea. So I put an announcement. So I thought, I'll test this idea. So I put an announcement on a meetup. That was back when the early days of meetup. Said, I'm having this meeting, call it Recover from Religion. I put a meetup 2 weeks ahead of time. And then the day of the meetup, we met at a back room of International House of Pancakes. And 11 people showed up, and I only knew 2 of them.
Wow.
And it was at the end of like 3 hours, the restaurant manager is kicking us out because he's closing the room. At that moment, I realized this isn't a publicity stunt. This is not a way to sell my books. This is a fucking need. And that was the beginning. It started off as a publicity stunt, so to speak, a way to sell more books. And then pretty quickly I realized, no, this is too serious. I'm not going to play around. So literally from the minute that meeting was over, Recovering from Religion was started. It didn't start at the beginning. It started at the end of that meeting. And I started holding weekly meetings right here in Kansas City with the help of Kay Huddleston and Cole Morgan, 2 other people here in town. And and then we split off, and we had 2 more meetings. So we got 3 meetings going all every month, all around the metro area. And they're well attended. Some of them, Cole was getting 25 people to show up to his meetings. I'm thinking, wow, we have really got a tiger by the tail. And this is all within months afterwards. So I knew there was something. I didn't know exactly how it would pan out. And I'll just tell you, the first 8 years of recovering from religion were difficult. It was hard. It was a constant slog, but we saw the need, and there were people saying they were benefiting from it. Mm-hmm. And then finally, once we got over that, you have to build your infrastructure, you have to build your IT systems, you have to build your name recognition, all those things we had to do. We had to do it hard. It was a lot of work, and a lot of people were involved, not just Daryl. And not just Gail. I mean, it was a whole bunch of people. So that's kind of the quick story.
Was Gail Jordan involved with it from the get-go? How did you connect with Gail?
No, she's been with us 6 years now. But no.
So how did you and Gail connect?
I met her in, I believe it was Cincinnati at a local little. It was Cincinnati, I think, a little free thought conference local. and she and Elliot were there. And then I did a special workshop for leadership because I like to push leadership, teach leadership in the secular community.
Mm-hmm.
And they came to my workshop, and I just loved them. I just instantly fell in love with both of them. And we kept in contact, and I met her at another event not long after that. And then when we needed an executive director, I announced it. We got 5 applicants, I think, for the job, and I interviewed them all. Gail was one of them, and she was hands down the best by a long shot. She was the best, and it was a good decision. Put that way.
Well, Genevieve, when did you first hear about recovering from religion, and what was your coming out of your through your secular lens? What was your thought about that as an organization and what it represented?
At this point, I can't think of the first moment where I heard about recovering from religion, but I think it was since before I started really getting involved with this that I knew it was there. And so, if I would go, I'm in like Facebook groups or on Reddit, and when people are talking about their trauma, I always, I've been telling everybody, go check out Recovering from Religion. You can call and talk to somebody, or I have friends that have gone through it, and I'm like, you should really volunteer, because it is so necessary. And it made perfect sense. I'm honestly surprised that it was an accident, because it seems so obvious. Of course we need this, especially,
of course.
Especially because a big complaint that I've heard from friends who have been dealing with religious trauma is that when they bring it up with their therapists, a lot of therapists don't really know about that. They don't really talk about that. A lot of therapists are religious, which is, also why the Secular Therapy Project is so important in conjunction with this.
Right.
It's just, I'm so happy that
the religious trauma that when was it? Dr. Marlene Winnell coined that phrase. How long ago was that, Dale?
10 years ago. 10 years ago.
So as a psychologist, RFR kind of predated that by a year or two.
Right.
As a psychologist, did you think that was a thing before she used that phrase, or did that surprise you, or what?
What we owe a lot to Dr. Winnell for putting a name to what we've been seeing all along. As a psychologist, going back, I've been a psychologist for 40 plus years.
Right.
I have seen trauma, and I've seen trauma that looked like it was perpetuated or caused by religion, but I never had a name for it until she came along. So, sometimes it's interesting when you can name something. I call it the red Volkswagen effect. In 1970, I bought my first Volkswagen. It was bright red.
Beetle bug.
And I had driven an old Rambler from Nashville, Tennessee to Wichita, where my family was, for Christmas. And while I was there, I traded in my old Rambler and bought this red bug. I drove all the way back to Tennessee from there. And you know something? There were hundreds of red Volkswagens on the highway going back to Nashville. I didn't see a single one on the way from Nashville to Wichita.
Yeah, but they were there.
Yeah, they were probably there. My perception wasn't tuned into that.
Yeah, that's a good phrase.
Now that we've got a name for religious trauma, we can start putting a diagnosis to that. We can start looking at the symptoms, the etiology, what causes something. And it's there. It's been there all along. We just couldn't see it. It's a wonderful gift that she's given us, and I can't say thank you enough to her, because as a result of that, many psychologists, many of us in the Secular Therapy Project, many social workers, clinical therapists now have a name to put on it, and there's more and more research being done. The fact is that we know what trauma looks like. What caused it could be religion. It could be war. It could be being a refugee. It could be, being a natural disaster. But of those 4 things I just named, the one thing that nobody ever talks about is religion.
Yeah.
And
we intend to have. We're gonna Genevieve. We'll have Dr. Winnell on the show. I'm gonna reach out to her soon. I haven't yet, but I will. I know several people personally. One guy I'm thinking of, as a good friend of mine, lives in the Nashville area. He did 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, and he's on medical PTSD. What am I looking for? From anyway, he's discharged because of medical reasons for PTSD from the military. Jesus, I couldn't think of military. My brain's whacked. But he will tell you, and he has told me, the trauma he experiences from his early religion as a Pentecostal is worse than the PTSD from the military. He said it's more traumatic. Waking up night sweats, thinking about hell. He was in the hardcore evangelical fundamentalist Pentecostal, raised as a boy. And he can compare the two, and he says, oh, hands down, religion is more traumatic to me than the military was. And that tells you something right there.
It does. And religion gets a pass because
it does.
People say, oh, religion's benign, religion is good, you have to be religious to be moral, all that kind of bullshit. Then that means psychologists, therapists don't look at it. They don't scratch down below the surface. But I'm guaranteeing you, if I had somebody come in my office now with signs and symptoms of trauma, I would scratch below the surface to try and find the roots. And if they said they'd been to Afghanistan, fine. I still want to know, what religion were you and what were you raised?
Right.
Because sometimes what we now know is there's a test you can take. CDC put it out about 8 or 9 years ago called the Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACE, ACE, Adverse Childhood Experience. I would encourage anybody that wants to go on there and take the test. What we know is if you score high on Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACE test, then you probably have got some kind of childhood trauma that you're still dealing with. Well, if you had childhood trauma and then you're exposed to religion or you're exposed to war, or you're exposed to domestic abuse or something, that compounds it. And some people would be calling that, it's got a name, it's called complex PTSD. There's still some controversy about how to define complex PTSD.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But think about your friend. He had trauma from his religious upbringing, and then he had trauma from his war experience.
Yeah.
That's pretty complex. That's two different serious sources of trauma for him.
Okay, so religious trauma. What do we say to the people? I'm thinking of my sweet little mama who loves everybody, and is just sweet little 87-year-old white-headed woman who loves Jesus and just thinks that he's the most wonderful thing and is very disturbed by my atheism. My evangelical pastor brother, his 2 sons and daughter-in-law who are on staff at his big church in East Texas, and they just preach the gospel and love people, and they're not doing any harm. They're not doing any damage. Everyone's happy. Everyone's doing great. And they look at us talking about religious trauma, and they just go, what are you talking about? There's no religious trauma in my world. What do you say to them?
Well, it's there. It's been there for decades. It's been there for centuries. I mean, the gay kid in those churches can't talk out loud about it, or he will be vilified from the pulpit, perhaps. The girl who got pregnant out of wedlock might be shamed in front of the whole church or brought before the elders, or there's something might happen. At the worst, there will be people gossiping behind her back because she's pregnant without a husband. Gay people who want to get married, even people who are just cis hetero living together could cause all sorts of controversy and getting kicked out of the church and family not talking to them. Shunning is a real issue among almost all patriarchal religions. Now, they may not be as systematic as Jehovah's Witnesses are or Seventh-day Adventists, but a Catholic family can shun you just as quick if you have an abortion, for example. Let's say you're a woman and you get pregnant, you don't want to have the baby, you have an abortion. They will shame the hell out of you until you are traumatized. And they will make sure that you are miserable. That can last a lifetime there. Those things are hidden, though, because the religion thinks they're doing the right thing.
Right. So it's these hidden things you're talking about. So the teenage boy who is you said you didn't want to talk about masturbation, but I'm going to talk about it. The teenage Daryl does not like to talk about masturbation. He just likes to do it. He doesn't like to talk about it. the teenage boy who's secretly masturbating and feeling guilt and shame because of it, does that produce trauma in him?
Absolutely, especially if somebody should find out, if he gets shamed in the locker room by other boys.
But even if he's not ever caught, even if he's not ever found out, just the idea that he's doing something sinful and shameful, what does that do to his psyche? Well,
you got to put into the play the other components of that indoctrination. You're going to hell. Hell is a pretty traumatic concept. And if you truly believe that you have violated God, I mean, think about this. How many, there's quite a few stories in the Middle Ages of priests cutting their own testicles off because they couldn't stop sex. I'm thinking that church traumatized that priest. That's a pretty radical thing to do. I know boys, 14 years old, who have contemplated the same thing, and they're Baptists. That's trauma. That is really crazy.
I mean, look at the language in the scripture. I'm thinking of right now, Jesus, scriptures attributed to Jesus saying something like this: if your right eye offends you, pluck it out. It'd be better for you to enter into life without an eye than to be cast into hell. If your right hand offends you, what do you think they're thinking that is?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
Cut your hand off, because it's better that you enter into life with one arm than to be cast into hell. What kind of a language is that for people to be digesting?
Language has consequences. Language goes straight into our brain. And when you're 5 years old and this language is being implemented in your brain, so is the religion. I tell this a lot in my talks. At 5 years old, you were being taught English. I'm guessing both of you. But I'll bet you never once thought, Mom and Dad, why aren't you teaching me Chinese? Why aren't you teaching me German? You never thought about that.
Right.
Neither did you think, for Genevieve, in your situation, you never thought, Mom and Dad, why aren't you teaching me to be a Buddhist?
Yeah.
And Dave, you never thought, Mom and Dad, why aren't you teaching me a Muslim? Because you are not aware. You can't make those choices. It is imposed in your brain right off the bat. Now, once you get old enough to be a critical thinker, it's so deeply embedded in you, you can't even see the fallacies of the religion you were raised in. And yet those fallacies can cause deep emotional conflict. It's called cognitive dissonance. And if you've got a dissonance between your biological body wanting to masturbate and your religious brain saying you can't do that or you're going to hell, that conflict constantly hitting over and over and over again can cause, especially adolescents, to do some pretty damaging things. Girls or boys cutting themselves. I mean, we see a lot of that coming out of churches.
Sure you do. Yeah.
Suicide, self-mutilation, emotional trauma and responses to, what would be a normal just getting naked in front of somebody in the shower could be traumatic because other kids are going to make fun of you about your body. I mean, there's lots of things that can happen. And it's all directly related to religion.
Yeah.
What's interesting too is that even though the Bible says to gouge out your own eyes or cut off your own hand, so often we see this trauma that causes people to then just be violent to others and to blame others. I mean, look at exactly what happened in Atlanta earlier this year. That was absolutely a sign of religious trauma, to be so tempted by these women that you go and massacre. So many of them. It's horrible. And the other thing too, when I'm thinking about, your sweet mom and brother and, all these families that are, have this great relationship with God, and like religion brings them so much value, just like how that fire and brimstone theology tends to coincide with conservatism. Another thing that tends to coincide with conservatism is not really believing anything's an issue if it doesn't affect you personally.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's true. That's good.
Yeah.
And that's that's exactly right, Genevieve. And they live in really a very tightly enclosed bubble. They went to a Christian school that their church has. The kids went to ORU, Oral Roberts University. Everything is, let's just keep all of the groupthink intact so you don't ever have to encounter anything that's outside the bubble. Of course, it's like living in that old movie called The Village. Do you remember that M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village, where everybody was protected within this environment that was carefully controlled? And if you got out, you realize there's a whole nother world going on out there, but it doesn't affect me. So I don't really have to worry about it. That's a good point, Genevieve. Well, let's get us out of here a little early tonight, so we don't run too late. We've got a sharp cutoff. Daryl, tell us how people can support recovery from religion, how they can get involved, all of that.
Well, go to first of all, if you need help, if you need support, you can go to recoveryfromreligion.org and hit the chat button, and you'll be able to talk to a volunteer who's really well trained. We have incredibly good training for our volunteers, and we put them through hours and hours of training and supervision before we let them talk to somebody. If you can talk on the phone, you can chat if you want. I think we cover 16 time zones. We have 300 volunteers, right around that many right now, covering 16 time zones, and some of them are in individual meetings face to face, and some of them are on phone or chat. So come to us if you need help, and we can find resources. If you need resources to deal with the fear of hell, if you need resources to understand what your own religious trauma might be, we can point you in the direction. So you don't have to suffer, number one, and number two, you don't have to wait or work on it.
And that's 24 hours a day.
Pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, we are a volunteer organization, but we got great volunteers in Australia. We got volunteers in the United Kingdom. And
the chances are, if you log into the chat room, the chances are somebody's going to respond pretty quickly. Is what you're saying, right? And then the Secular Therapy Project. Talk a bit about that.
Well, the Secular Therapy Project is, if you need a therapist that's not going to send you back to church or pray with you or say, I've actually known therapists to say your depression is caused because you're an atheist. Go back to church and it'll get rid of your depression. I'm serious. There are licensed therapists out there that say this kind of shit. So you can go to seculartherapy.org. That's the website. And what you have to do is you have to register as a client first. And you can use a fake name. It's all confidential. You use a fake name or use your own email or whatever. And then you can search. It'll allow you into our system, and you can search for a therapist who fits the specialty you need or is close to you if you want to try and meet with them face to face. I do want to caution people, many therapists cannot practice outside of their state. So they may be able to work with you on the phone or on the computer if they're within your same state, but if it crosses state lines, they may not be able to. Some can, some can't. So you then email them through our system, and they will correspond with you to decide if you want to work with them or if they fit within their practice. Now they do charge. We don't charge anything for the Secular Therapy Project. It's a referral service, if you will, but of course therapists are professionals. And if you want to support Recovery from Religion, just be supportive of us, you can do one of two things. You can donate and hit the donate button, or you can get on social media and like our stuff or join our groups. And you can also volunteer. We're always looking for volunteers. And there's lots of things to do. We need IT support people. We need web kind of people. We need chat line agents. We need a small group, support group people all around the world. There's a lot of different jobs that we have, and we're always looking for somebody to fill new niches. We have a blog. You can write for our blog. There's video content we produce every year. There's lots of things you can do to get involved if you're interested in actually helping somebody get over their religious trauma or their religious indoctrination. Is that the answer there for you, Dave?
Yes. I just I refer people almost anytime I'm doing anything. I send people to RFR because I so believe in the work you guys do. I've told you this many times, Daryl. I'm just so impressed with what RFR is and the people you serve and the way that you help people and how the quality of the help. I mean, I've seen firsthand. I've been with you when you've been in chat rooms and you've shown me the chats going on, and the training that goes into that. You know, they're not just somebody spouting off a bunch of advice to someone.
Oh no.
You know, it's so carefully done and so well done, and it really, really, really helps people. So I'm really.
Your listeners, don't take my word for it. Don't take David's word. You can hit the chat button and experience it yourself. Just tell them Daryl sent you. You're just looking at what the services are, and ask them any question you want. In fact, try to get them to convert you or deconvert you. I guarantee they won't take the bait.
Yeah.
Tell me, should I quit going to church? And that Monday night meeting, that RFRX, is that open to anyone, or do you have to kind of be a member?
It's open to anybody.
Every week you have that, right? How would you explain that? It's a big Zoom meeting with like 100 to
and we always
a lot
have
of people.
A speaker that's an expert in whatever. I mean, as I'm speaking to you tonight, we have a speaker talking about a cult that she got out of and how she got out of it. Rob Palmer did a talk a couple of weeks ago on the skeptic mind and how to train your mind to be more skeptical. I mean, they're valuable kinds of ideas. I've spoken on a few times on things on how do you deal with religious trauma, or how you get infected with religion in the first place. Every week we've had Dr. Marlene Winnell on it as well. You name the person. Dr. Hector Garcia's been on it.
Well, not everybody that speaks on there is an expert, because I've done it. So you do have your random.
We set the bar pretty low for you. I'm just saying.
They let me on because I'm dying, I think, but that's the only reason.
Well, we like you, Dave. But everybody, I mean, they do. What you've got to say is important.
Yeah, I do talk about looking at death, and that's something. There is a big fear of death out there that I've encountered since I've been doing Dying Out Loud, and it's something that we do need to talk more about.
Absolutely. Right.
But Daryl, you're such a good friend, and I really appreciate our friendship that just keeps getting richer and richer. So thank you for coming on tonight.
My pleasure, and good to meet you, Genevieve.
Yeah,
thanks for all you're doing.
Of course, it is so nice to meet you again. You're such a beacon of light in this world. It's been amazing hearing from you. And once again, thank you for everything that you're doing with these organizations, because you're helping a lot of people.
So when Bevan and I showed up at the excursion last weekend, there's all these cabins scattered out in the woods, and we're driving up and we're not sure. The driveways go all directions, and it was very confusing. And so I pulled up to where some cars were, and I said, well, let's just see if this is it. And then I heard that laugh, and I knew that I was where I needed to be, the Darrel Ray laugh. I said, yeah, there's Daryl. We're here.
Well, I got to go the other way. Somebody said there was a lot of noise in your direction that night. Just saying. I wouldn't know what that noise was, David, but anyway.
Oh, well. We're out of time, folks. We're out of time.
Oh, busted.
I was busted. Yeah, we were a little louder than we thought we were. But again, folks, hit the like and subscribe button if you can. If you can donate Patreon-wise, we appreciate it. It takes money to put the show on, and we love coming to you each week. Genevieve, remind us who's on next week.
Oh gosh. Oh yes, next week.
Captain
I'm
Deadpool.
so excited. Yes, Captain Deadpool. I had to think about it for 1 second. So unfortunately, Dave will not be joining us, but we'll still keep the D and GD. It'll just be Genevieve and Dadpool. He is, a famous TikToker, incredible friend. I'm so excited for that. And our guest that night is going to be his co-host from his show, Nerds and Heresy. That is Natty Nat. I'm very excited to talk to her about dispelling pseudoscience and myths and cults and all things weird under the sun that people believe, and rocks, of course, too. Very excited.
Because what's her title? She's a
she is a geoarchaeologist.
Yes.
She warned us not to let her talk about rocks because she won't shut up. But I love rocks, so I will nerd out with them all night long.
Yeah.
And definitely you can check out their YouTube show. I think they go live on Sundays. But that's Nerds and Heresy. You can find it on YouTube too. So
I should be landing in time to put a phone call in. I'll have a question about rocks, I'm sure. So
yes, please do.
I'll see you guys remotely. Daryl, we'll see you one of these days soon. Yes. Genevieve, thanks again. And that's our show for tonight, folks.
Thanks.